Most business owners get really panicked when they think about getting sued. But here's what successful entrepreneurs know. They know that the outcome of that lawsuit is decided well before they're even served, well before they're even sued. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what happens when you get served with a lawsuit, and more importantly, what you can do to be prepared in the event that this unthinkable but likely event does happen. It's a common misconception that a lawsuit comes out of the blue, right? That it's chaotic or it's random. The reality is that it's pretty darn predictable. So what are the warning signs? Well, a warning sign number one is an unhappy customer. That is where most of these things start, and you've got to take action early on. Is it a refund? Is it giving them a gift card? Is there something you can do to avoid it escalating from there? And you have to think about how expensive a lawsuit's going to be. Giving a refund would have been a good thing to do, even if it violates your refund policy or goes against your refund policy. Sometimes that makes sense. The next thing that often happens is called a demand letter, right? There is a letter. That person has now engaged an attorney, the person who was unhappy in some way or harmed in some way, and they engage an attorney, and the attorney says, hey, my client was hurt and was harmed, and give us this much money and we won't sue you. That is where you are in a good position to negotiate. It may have a ridiculous number or something that doesn't reflect reality, but that's sort of a shot across the bow. That demand letter can also have some repercussions later on. If they offered a settlement early on and you didn't accept it, that could be potentially used against you. But that is not something you throw in the trash. That should start up the negotiations or start up the conversation. Sometimes there's not a basis for the litigation at all, and you're going to want to tell the other side your client is lying to you, right? You may want to hire an attorney. Be careful, everything you say can and will be used against you. But if you then can't agree on an outcome that suits both parties, the next step is likely going to be a complaint gets served on your registered agent. Hopefully you have a professional registered agent. If you don't, here's what can happen. Someone can show up at the address listed in the Secretary of State site, could be your home address, could be your business address, and they show up with a lawsuit. There's called a service of process is what this is. And there's a process server who shows up. That process server can show up at all times of day or night. You could be having a party. It could scare your family. It could embarrass you in front of your friends. It could make your employees think that maybe this company's going to have problems. And so it's important to have a registered agent, because the registered agent accepts service of process professionally. They're going to be discreet, but that service of process is the first step in the lawsuit. It notifies you that you are being sued, and that's going to really start a clock that can work pretty quickly against you. You've been sued. Now what do? Documentation is your defense. The facts hopefully are in your favor. The moment you get sued, you're going to want to make sure you're collecting all of the following types of documents. So don't destroy anything. That is absolutely not going to help you. Even if the document may not be helpful, destroying it will get you in a lot of trouble with the court. So you're going to want to find those clear contracts and agreements. Hopefully you listen to me and you do have contracts, written contracts in place, but sometimes you're going with an email, and you're going with a purchase order, and you're going with some text messages or Slack messages or something to that effect. Those can still show that there is an agreement between the parties. So you want to collect all of that information related to the communications with the other side. You want to have organized financial records. Someone could come and dig into the financial records to determine, do you have the money to pay? What was the nature of your business? How successful were you? Is this even worth pursuing your business? That's something you want to have organized financial records. Another is you want to have corporate compliance documents. You want to have those documents that show that you're exercising business judgment, that when money goes into or out of the company, it's clearly a distribution or it's clearly a contribution. There's no question about commingling of funds or of your lack of professionalism in running this company. You're going to want to have those email communications, the communication records, maybe phone calls, maybe messages that are sent via any messaging system. And these could be things that are related to the relationship with the person who's suing, but they could also be internal communications, which show what it is happened leading up to this event. As an attorney, one of the things I always say is always assume if you put it in an email, you put it in a text, you put it in a Slack, it's going to be read in court. And so make sure that when you're, as a going forward process, you're not putting anything in any messages or communication that could potentially be harmful to you. And then if there are any things that occurred immediately following the incident, you want to make sure those documents are brought together as well. So you want to really create a full record, everything you have in your possession related to this transaction, or I should say this incident. And it can sometimes you go through it and say, man, we really screwed up. And that's going to put you in a better position in terms of negotiation. You're not going to take a hard line, rely on what your attorney says, but you have to be honest with them so they can come up with the best defense for you. That documentation, and assume the other side's going to see it, is going to be what determines the outcome of this lawsuit. The time to organize and make sure you have these things, little secret, is not after you get sued. These are things that you should be doing in the ordinary course of business using a great customer resource management tool or through just Google Docs, notes that you're keeping, meeting minutes. Keeping good meeting minutes, keeping good notes during the normal course of business is going to lead to better, more reliable outcomes at the end of the day. So let's talk about the timeline. Timelines can vary from court to court depending on who's involved and your ability to get an attorney and some of the delay tactics. But you're going to get sued. You're going to get served with a complaint. That complaint, the summons and complaint, you have a certain number of days. It's going to say in that document how many days you have to respond. You will typically, you're going to file a response to the complaint. You're going to have an answer to the complaint. But sometimes this lawsuit is so frivolous, you may file for a motion to dismiss. You may want to dismiss that lawsuit before you even give them any information. And so there's a lot of different things that your attorney is going to be able to do. You need to make sure you're getting an attorney as quickly as possible after you're served to make sure that you're properly represented in court. Here's something to keep in mind. You cannot represent the LLC if you're not an attorney. There's no pro se proceedings if it's an LLC. You can represent yourself if you're sued individually, but you cannot, as the member, manager, owner of the company, represent that LLC in court. So you're gonna have to get an attorney. If you're not able to settle it, you're not able to come to an agreement with the other side, take that into account when it may be a low dollar value transaction or low dollar value lawsuit. It may be better to just settle and have to go hire an attorney, get a retainer, go through the rigmarole of the whole thing, especially if the facts are not on your side. But every hour your lawyer spends hunting for documents or having to help you get organized is another hour you're paying for their services. So if you are moving forward, make sure you give it to the attorney, all the documents with a bow on it. Action steps you can take. The documentation is going to be on your side. And I cannot stress this enough. Everything you say in an email or a text, I don't care if it's on Telegram or it's on WhatsApp or it disappearing, whatever it is, you write it on a scrap of paper, assume that is going to get into the formal record. Even phone calls can be recorded. It might not be a two-party state, but those can still be recorded. So having a system where you are documenting the communications with customers, you're documenting your communications with vendors, you have a simple documentation system that you can keep up with. Having those systems in place right from the beginning, again, better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Having them right in place at the beginning is incredibly important. Working with your registered agent and how to work with them effectively, the most important thing you can do is to keep your registered agent updated on how to best contact you. And if you do get a communication from them, man, make sure that it's not going to spam. So have them in your contacts list. Make sure it goes to a priority. If you get an email from them, you want to make sure you're responding. So your ongoing routine should be one where documentation and maintaining records is something that you do in the ordinary course of business. Ordinary course of business documents are those that are going to be really easy to get admitted in a court case, and so you want to keep them in the regular course of business. I recommend you put on your calendar at least once a month. You have a process where you're going and creating meeting minutes for your LLC. You're doing some cleanup on the documentation. You're making sure that anything that sounds like it may be a problem in the future, you're sort of checking that box. Somebody's threatening you in an email or they're a very unhappy customer. Assume that you're going to have to produce those things that help you at a later date. So think of all of this as lawsuit insurance. And the good news is you don't have to pay for this insurance. Our professional registered agent service just isn't about receiving documents. We provide digital document organization and compliance reminders to keep your company in good standing. If your company's not in good standing, the potential is there they just sue you instead of your company. If you don't have the meeting minutes, the operating agreement, those things, then potentially your company will be disregarded. If you don't have things like a bank account or an EIN number, those kinds of things can all come back to haunt you. And that's what our registered agent service does. We provide you with an immediate same-day notification of the receipt of legal documents. We can make sure that you don't wind up with a default judgment and that you have the documentation you need to fight the best case you possibly can. So click to learn how we can help protect your business before a lawsuit ever happens.